Hey, life designers. What's up? Welcome to Intentional Tuesdays. In the written portion of this week's post, I posed the question, are you an artist? And I think most of us would answer that question, no, I'm not an artist. And I think that's really unfortunate because I think approaching our lives with a sense of artistry offers a lot of really super cool benefits. I really do think it's a game changer. I go into a lot of the discussion around the benefits of approaching life like an artist in the written portion. So if you haven't checked that out, I definitely recommend that you check out the written portion of this week's episode. The video portion here will focus on how do we achieve that in our lives? How do we approach our lives with a bit more artistry and an artist's mentality? So if that sounds interesting to you, then stick with us because we are going to jump right in. I think most of us suffer from a very limited view or definition of what constitutes art. And if it's not something that we hang on a wall and look at, then it's not art. Or we allow the reaction of the audience, the reaction of the people around us, we allow their reaction to determine whether or not the work that we are doing is art. And I think this is a really unfortunate definition of art. And I would like to offer a better definition. And I think it's a definition that is not only more accurate, I think it is also more useful. So I'm going to share that definition with you now. So in my mind, there are two criteria that have to be met in order for something to be art. The first is intentionality on behalf of the person who's doing the creation, the person who's doing the work. The second one is self-expression. There has to be an element of self-expression in art. So for me, the definition of art is really intentional self-expression. I think if you really sit with this definition and really put it to the test, you'll realize that it actually goes a long way to explain a lot of things. So for example, take a piece of artwork by Jackson Pollock. You might look at a Jackson Pollock and you might say, that is just a bunch of random paint splashed on a canvas. How could you call that art, let alone great art? Now, if you really look closely, what we would be doing in that situation is that would require us to be assuming that the artist had no intention and that there was really no intentional self-expression in those brushstrokes, in those paint splashes. And that's a really big assumption to make, but you can kind of feel how this definition of art being intentional self-expression really does hold up under scrutiny, I think. So now, of course, the goal is to look at your own life and ask yourself, and this can apply anywhere in your life, whether it be at work, whether it be at home, wherever. Ask yourself the question, am I being intentional in my self-expression? And that will give you some insight as to how you're approaching that particular aspect of your life. I suspect that most of us, most of the time, are not approaching our lives with that heightened sense of intentional self-expression. We are just simply going through the motions day after day, getting things done, perhaps, but doing it in a way that is rather mindless and really lacking intention, let alone intentional self-expression. And I call this living by default. So again, you can really apply this to literally any aspect of your life. How are you responding to the emails at work? How are you engaging in conversation with your significant other? How are you engaging with your kids when you take them to school or when you make their lunch in the morning? How are you going about the housework, folding the laundry, whatever your tasks may be for that day? Are you going through those actions mindlessly, or are you really doing so with intention, and not only that, an intentional self-expression? A few years back, I remember the Subway had an advertising campaign where they were calling their employees sandwich artists. Now, do I believe that every employee of Subway was making sandwiches with a deep sense of intentional self-expression? No, almost certainly not. But I do think it's possible. I really do think it would be possible for someone who is working at Subway to have a deep sense of intentional self-expression while they're taking orders, while they're making sandwiches. And I really do think in some meaningful way that would in fact be art. So what would it take to make this kind of a shift from doing something, seemingly as mundane as making sandwiches? What would it take to shift that from just going through the motions into something that really could be considered art by my definition? The first thing that it would take would be a degree of self-awareness. And if you think about it, in order to do any kind of skillful self-expression, one has to be aware of what it is that you're trying to express. So the first step is always going to be to get in touch and to really kind of look inward and figure out, okay, where am I right now? What is my mental state? What is my emotional state? Why am I doing the things that I'm doing? Why am I, in this job? Why am I doing this particular task? And really getting in touch with what is it about all of those things? What is it that I want to express to the world? And how might I go about actually communicating those sentiments through my action? So that it starts with the self-awareness and then a decision about, once you've decided what it is you want to communicate, then you can decide, okay, how do I go about doing that? So now exactly what you express, what you choose to share with the world, what you choose to communicate, that is entirely up to you. As the artist, it is your decision about what to communicate. That is what actually makes the art beautiful, because that is where it becomes a personal expression that only you're the only one who could have done that particular self-expression because it is from you. So that really is the true beauty of the art. It's not about how the audience reacts to that art. That is largely out of our control. As an artist, all we can do is put our offering to the world in the most authentic, intentional, self-expressive way. And then, what happens beyond that is really, beyond our control and frankly not the point of the art in the first place. In the written portion, I mentioned the example of Vincent van Gogh, who, by any account would be considered one of the greatest artists of all time. Vincent van Gogh went his entire life largely unappreciated and unrecognized. It wasn't until after he died that his paintings started to become appreciated and people started buying them, and all of a sudden he became understood to be this tremendous artist. But during the course of his lifetime, he was creating thousands of pieces of art and nobody wanted them. But it was absolutely still art, because he was expressing himself with an authenticity and an intention that was true to himself. So my challenge to you this week is to bring a little bit more of this artist mentality, this way of thinking, into some aspect of your life. And again, it can be at home, it can be at work. Just find some aspect of your life and approach it with a heightened sense of intentional self-expression, and really get in touch with, how am I communicating something about myself through the work that I'm doing, and really just allow yourself to feel that artistic expression. And then notice what changes for you. Notice what approaching your work in that way, how does that actually change you? My hunch is that the world will suddenly get a lot brighter and a lot more vivid. At least that's what I'm hoping will happen for you. So that's it for this week's Intentional Tuesdays. I hope you enjoyed it. Hope you find it useful. As always, I appreciate your time. I appreciate your attention. So with that, I wish you all the best. And until our paths cross again, a prosperous journey. Take care.